Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for Constitutionally Speaking. And we have been intimating what we'll be discussing this morning, and many people are in eager anticipation. As we had mentioned recently, the U.S. accused countries who employ the Cuban doctors in their respective countries as participants in a trafficking in person scheme run by the Cuban government. Well, what is trafficking in person? What is that all about? We will get all the deets right now from the expert, and he's the Deputy Public Defender, the one and only Mr. Herbert McKenzie. Good morning, Mr. Mack, and welcome.
Good morning, sir. Thank you very much for having me. Sounds like an interesting announcement that will be made.
Everybody's waiting on that, the announcement.
So, and I enjoyed the waiting line too.
All right. Not a problem. It will be coming up before 9 o'clock. Yes. Now, trafficking. Yes, that's what we're talking about this morning. Take it away. What do you want to tell us about it?
All right. Before I go into human trafficking, I just want to mention right up front that human trafficking is a crime in Jamaica. Many people probably will not recall that in 2001, the U.S. State Department issued a trafficking in persons report. And in that report, they said that while the Jamaican government has demonstrated overall increasing efforts compared to previous reporting period, the U.S. government was not, the government, in the U.S. government's view, did not fully meet the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking in persons. That was in 2001. And so, to improve that, amongst other actions taken by the Jamaican government, was the enactment of the Trafficking in Persons law. The full name of it is Trafficking in Persons Prevention, Suppression, and Punishment Act.
Okay.
That piece of law came into force in March 2007, actually the 1st of March 2007. So having said all that, it shouldn't come as any big surprise to anybody when the U.S., under this current regime, decide to throw that accusation at countries who employ Cuban doctors, having regards to the historical relationship between the United States and Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
Now back to the legislation, Trafficking in Person Act. Frequently hear people call it TIP for short. No, the purpose of that legislation, Trafficking in Person Act, was to set in place measures to prevent and to combat trafficking in persons, with a particular emphasis on victims who are children and female.
Mm-hmm.
And it made those expressly criminal with big punishments, in some cases about 20 years for them. Now, the commonest form of human trafficking identified, or they still are, sex trafficking, forced labor, debt bondage. Forced labor is the accusation by the Americans are true. And let me just say right up front, as far as Jamaica is concerned, we are not involved in any human trafficking with Cuban doctors. But if the accusations were to be true,
yes,
the Americans would be referring to the forced labor, because you hear shouts of Cuban doctors being paid and the money they have to send the money back to Cuba. Or the Cuban government is paid, and then out of that they pay the Cuban doctors a certain amount. Now, that would constitute the forced labor aspect of human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the three main forms of human trafficking. There's another one being contemplated called organ harvesting. Mm-hmm. Not very popular or legal landscape, but it exists elsewhere in the world.
Which is to remove organs from individuals and basically sell them for profit.
Precisely. That's a huge profit too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Now, under our law, it says that an individual commits the offense of trafficking in person, where for the purpose of exploitation, the individual recruits, transports, transfers, harbors, or receives another person within Jamaica. Or the individual recruits, transports, transfers another person from Jamaica to another country. Or thirdly, the individual recruits, transports, transfers, or receives another person from another country into Jamaica. So those three arms capture any of the conduct of human trafficking, because you send the person if you receive the person from another country into Jamaica, or if you actually send the person to another country from Jamaica, or you do it within Jamaica, that constitutes human trafficking. And not too long ago, there was determined in the Supreme Court a case on human trafficking where the persons were convicted. These were not Jamaican nationals, and they had their nationals here working in Jamaica. And the case confiscated their passports. Their living conditions were very circumscribed. There's a limitation, a check on their movement to and from the place of work and the place of residence. And the salary was very, very low. And the court found that was human trafficking. Now, to execute all these, the recruiting, the transporting, the transferring, the harboring, and the receiving, the law mentioned the means by which those are done, which forms part of the conduct trafficking person. And the means the law mentioned are threats or use of force. If you threaten the person or use force, get the person to do what you want to do, to get the person to move from Jamaica, to get the person to move into Jamaica, or to get the person to move wherever is within the boundaries of Jamaica. If you abduct or if you kidnap, if you use deception or fraud, you trick the person, and we know quite a bit of the tricks used. You lure the person by telling them that you have a fancy job for them, and they're going to believe in this upscale society where basically it's like, you can't give to heaven. Milk on the will flow there. Or abuse of power. Usually abuse of power situation arises in guardianship, relationship, or wife or husband. And the fifth one is inducement to get consent. The inducement to get consent usually plays out when the individual trafficker induces a parent or a guardian to release a child or a ward into the individual custody, and you provide some sort of inducement, cash, promise, favors, kind, to get the person consent to release the child. So any one of those means used by the individual to receive, to transport, to transfer, or recruit persons constitute the offence of trafficking person.
Certainly. Certainly, it must come with some penalties, and I'm sure you're going to get to that.
Yeah, the ones I've just described. Anybody convicted of that, susceptible to a sentence of 20 years maximum, or to a fine, or both.
You said 20?
20 years.
Okay. Wow.
And even you see the means I mentioned earlier, the threat or use of force, the abduction, the kidnapping, fraud, abuse of power, inducement.
Yes.
Even if those means are not present, once the person is a child, then the individual commits trafficking person. You don't have any of those means. Once a child is involved, child labor or child sexual exploitation, it doesn't matter whatever means the individual use to get the child in that situation, then the offense would have been completed. And it casts a wide net. It means the law casts a wide net, because persons who are basically not directly involved in human trafficking but facilitate by either conceal the knowledge, remove evidence, withhold information, or destroy anything like travel document that belong to another person, or any form of identification or anything that indicates the person's immigration status, that person will be regarded as facilitating human trafficking, and that person who can be liable.
Yes. Mr. McKenzie, as far as the law is concerned, what kind of protections would you say exist for victims of human trafficking, and how do these laws sort of help them to rebuild their lives?
But the first one is, and I'm not saying it in the order of importance now.
Yes.
Any person who's convicted of human trafficking, the court will always must make an order for them to compensate financially the victim or victims. In addition to that, there is a move now, international, and it's recognized in Jamaica because the Ministry of Justice has a trafficking person section or department, there's an education program that is available, and in it, they educate people on what sort of subtle signs to use by victims, because the trafficking in person can be very discreet, happen right in front of your eyes, and you're not known. The only person who sometimes knows about it are the victims themselves and the traffickers. So there are some subtle signs that they are training people to use to protect themselves. Of course, there are the obvious, not so subtle one where if you are being snatched, you bawl out loud and you run. So right now, these really are the protections against it. In addition to that, too, sharing information. Mm-hmm. If you're an adult, you share information with persons to tell them that the condition under which you're working are such that this is not something that you are doing voluntarily. You share the information, you may very well find somebody sharp enough to realize what is going on and then to inform the authorities. Another category of person that gets caught in this wide net is that group who knowingly rent their houses or their buildings or their premises out to the trafficker to keep persons. Because for some nationals in Jamaica, and includes Jamaicans too, one of the methods they use is that they accommodate the persons being trafficked at a different location from the job site or from the exploitation site. So you'll find that there's a house or apartment rented, and some of these places are rented in really swanky neighborhoods too, you know. And in that apartment, in that house or on those premises, all the persons there are bussed there in the evening from work and bussed there in the morning from the home to the place of work or the place of exploitation. And that again happening right in the eyes of everybody, under everybody's nose, and they don't realize it. Usually in cases like those, the trafficker or the traffickers are usually well-funded, well-financed, highly regarded, and people of substantial means. So they can perpetrate this human trafficking offense in wide open, and people don't realize it. In fact, sometimes some of the victims themselves are not aware that they are being human, they are being trafficked. Mm-hmm. They may realize that the job is hard compared to the remuneration gained from it, but they're not fully aware that they are the victims of human trafficking. Now the person who rents, the owner of that premise will rent it out to the trafficker, knowing fully well what the trafficker is doing. That person himself or herself commits the crime of human trafficking. And he or she, as a landlord or a renter, is susceptible to a sentence of 20 years imprisonment, him or herself.
So the law does take it very seriously, obviously.
Oh, the law take it very, very seriously. It is just that it is not the easiest case to prove in court, because you have to have the cooperation of the victims. So, and there are some victims, and this is real, where they are so well remunerated by the trafficker after the offense has been discovered and charged, that the victim himself or herself resigns from the position and chooses not to attend court. In fact, sometimes to actively hide away from court, not to give evidence.
So, is there any plan to improve the legislation to combat this crime more effectively?
Yes, there are move afoot being considered by Parliament to see if they can enhance the legislation in a way to get people to come and people to speak up, or to actually capture more traffickers. Sorry, it is not easy to do, because it takes a while to actually discern the offense and to actually establish the offense in law. Because by simply underpaying, that alone is not enough to establish human trafficking. One of the strongest indicator, and it alone does not work, is the capturing, my word now, or demanding or retaining the person's passport, travel document, or any other form of identification document. That is the first, or one of the first indicator that the authorities start to use to see if they can establish human trafficking.
Okay.
Now, if it's proved, there can be some aggravating factors in it. And these are factors which also go toward establishing human trafficking. And if I may run through a few, given the time we have now. First of all, the person who is alleged to be the trafficker, if that person has a prior conviction for human trafficking, that is an aggravating factor which will tell against him in court and which will up the sentence, despite all his mitigating factors, closer to the ceiling of 20 years. Another aggravating feature is if the trafficker uses force or threat on the victim. In other words, if the victim chooses not to participate,
yes,
apply some form of force. Or use an offensive weapon, a gun or an explosive, or use biological or chemical agent. If you might have biological or chemical agent, you drug the person.
Mm-hmm.
And the person doesn't know what state of consciousness he or she's in, and the person is taken away and carried to the point of exploitation. For sex trafficking, the use of biological or chemical agent is usually present. May not be used at the time of the snatching, but once you get the person to the environment, then it is used to subdue the person so that the sexual exploitation can take place or take place with minimum force being used thereafter.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I see time is running out on us, but
yes,
there's something I want to say. Is if indeed Jamaica is involved in human trafficking, and again I repeat that Jamaica is not, then as a matter of common sense, nobody is going to be prosecuted because the state is not going to turn around and prosecute itself, if you understand the point I'm making.
I'm understanding, yes.
Yes. And if it is indeed so and can be proved, then this is where the U.S. authorities will probably have a ground of taking sanctions against us. I mean, they'll simply say, oh, we have evidence that there's human trafficking in Jamaica and Jamaican government not doing anything to it. Here are the sanctions.
Mm-hmm.
Visa fly, visa go, visa revoke, visa not given,
mm-hmm,
and nobody gets interest in the United States. So, as a parting shot, I would say to persons who suspect or think that they are victim or know that they are victim of human trafficking, say something or do something.
yes,
The persons who are aware of human trafficking, say something, do something. There's a human trafficking line tip number at the Ministry of Justice, and if you don't know where the Ministry of Justice is, if you don't have a phone, just go there, make a call, send an email, and the Ministry of Justice
will follow through.
Jump into action.
Yes. All right. We learned so much this morning from you, Mr. McKenzie. Did you have something you were about to say?
No, more and none. I think I might have to continue this next week because there are quite a number of other points on the law itself as it's related to Jamaica that I would like to mention.
It's a very topical issue, and I'm happy that you brought it up this morning. We learned a lot, and we look forward to learning even more. Thank you so much for your time and for the information shared. Have a great day today.
And to you too.